70% of workers approve of unions right now. The thing that holds people back is it going to be worth it? Should I devote personal time, spiritual time, emotional time to an effort if it's not going to pay off?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Dave Camper is a senior strategist at the Economic Policy Institute. He is the author of Who's Got the Power? The Resurgence of American Unions. I'm really excited about this conversation. I believe Dave is also from Minnesota, so a very Minnesota-heavy program today. We'll have to do something about that and put him on a blacklist or something for a year before we get another Minnesota person on the program.
We should take a field trip up to
maybe
Minnesota.
Maybe we could do that. Those are definitely two different responses to having a bunch of Minnesota folks on the program. But Dave Camper, welcome to the program.
We're just that good.
That's right. That's right. So I did get that right. You are from Minnesota.
Yes. I live a couple suburbs north of Minneapolis. And,
okay.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Well, really excited to have you here. I think shockingly, we've followed each other on Twitter for, I believe, a number of years, but I think shockingly, this is the first time that we've ever got you on the program. Is that right?
It is, and I'm thrilled to be here. You're fantastic folks. I just saw Adam last week at a conference for my day job, and he actually appeared on a panel that I put together and did fantastic. And so I feel like I'm returning the favor a bit. But actually, you're doing me the favor having me here because you're pretty great.
Well, fantastic. I have always enjoyed what you have to say. I don't participate very much in the discourse online. I kind of get it all out on the weekends, but I really appreciate what you have to say, and I feel like we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you are you identify yourself as something of a pessimist, and I sort of identify with that a lot, and I find myself kind of occupying the role of a pessimist. But this book is really something about the story of how you've turned coat on me, and now you've become an optimist. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about that. But we'll start by asking you what made you want to write the book. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, I mean, it really is that story, and it's part of something I'm really, really good at, which is being wrong. I'm wrong all the time now, and I remember I tell the story in the book. April of 22, or still March. I was working at the Economic Policy Institute. My colleague said, "Hey, there's this election for this union at Staten Island for the Amazon facility. Should we put some attention to it?" And I said, "No, they're going to get killed." And he said, "They have a chance of winning?" "No, they're going to get killed. We shouldn't even bother." And of course, I was terribly, completely wrong. And that was kind of the start of several years of being wrong again and again. And I was always wrong because I was being too pessimistic. And I realized maybe my pessimism is out of place now. Maybe there's actually reason to be optimistic. It's so hard to be optimistic in the labor movement if you've been in it for 30 years like I have, because we have these moments where it seems exciting and then it gets terrible again. But I've actually become an optimist, and I think we can all use a little hope right now. So I wrote a book to hopefully give a little bit of hope.
And so the book is sort of a compilation of some of these stories that have given you hope. As we speak, one of the focuses of your book, Starbucks Workers United, they're engaging in their largest and most open-ended action yet. Can you remind folks a little bit about that movement's origin story?
Yeah, it started with a handful of shops in Buffalo, New York. Jazz Brissac, one of the great early organizers of this, their book, Get on the Job and Organize, is a fantastic accounting of those early days. And they won a couple of elections at a couple of Starbucks stores. And again, brilliant people like me who are always right said, well, that's nice for them. Good luck. But what happened is workers across the country picked up that story, and they started organizing, and all of a sudden you were getting 10, 20 union elections a week at Starbucks, and now they represent over 600 across the country. And as that's going on, they've been ratcheting up a pressure campaign for the last 4 years. And in 2024, that led to a significant breakthrough where the company actually finally agreed to negotiate. And I was as surprised as anyone else that happened, but you can't understate how big a deal that was, that one of the major, anti-union companies in the country agreed to negotiate with the union, they clearly haven't been negotiating in anything like good faith. They clearly haven't been trying to take care of, reach an actual contract. And so these Starbucks workers who have been practicing strikes for years now, most of the Starbucks workers in the union have at least gone on strike once or twice. They're now calling out the big guns and kind of going on the big open-ended unfair labor practice strike in an attempt to finally pull that deal across the finish line. And it's the ultimate test of a strategy that I was sure was never going to work, but in fact has proven remarkably effective.
They and you mentioned that they're close to the finish line. On their website, they say that that's what they say. They quote, "The actual negotiations are close to the finish line. The remaining dispute is over less than a single average day's sales, less than 4 months of CEO Nichols' 2024 compensation, and less than 1/4% of the company's annual revenue." I mean, that sounds very close to the finish line. How do you feel like the current events add to what you've written in the book?
Well, it's both ways. I'm thrilled that the Starbucks workers are continuing to take the offensive and continuing to move forward. It's also true that in the months since I wrote the manuscript, things have gotten terrible for a lot of folks. One of my huge oversights in the book is I barely mentioned federal workers in there at all. And of course, federal workers are getting clobbered right now. They're getting destroyed. They're having a very difficult time. But all that being said, like you just had MFE on, like they're still fighting, they're still winning, they're moving the ball. And I would rather go into this Trump administration with today's labor movement than I would with any labor movement of my lifetime. And I'm 51 now.
That, lines up perfectly with our next question, which is sort of like, how do you see, like new organizers like Starbucks, Amazon, like especially like the new unions, how can they work with more established organizers and unions that may be facing this sort of pessimism that you and Jacob have both talked about? Like, how can those two sort of factions sort of work together to continue to grow the labor movement?
Oh, such a good question, because this is a real problem. When I've been in so many rooms where experienced longtime union leaders will say, hey, we want new workers, we want young leaders, we want new people. And what they mean is we want them to come in on our terms. We want them to come in on the way we've always done things. And what the labor movement has to do, always has to do, is to be in a constant process of reinvention. We have a generation now, the younger millennials and Gen Z, who embrace solidarity with a natural excitement that was not present when I was that age. You know, when I was growing up in the 90s, the thing to be was an anarchist. You got off the grid, you separated yourself. Younger workers now are embracing solidarity, and I think we need to accept, those of us who have been around a little while, that we have a lot less to teach them than they have to teach us. And honestly, the best thing we can be doing is getting out of their way and supporting them. Because first of all, they're going to be the ones taking care of us when we're old, but also they're successful. They're doing really good things and they're doing them very well. And let's embrace that success. But this is a heavy lift for people in the labor movement, who, especially those who spent the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, like in a defensive crouch, because you needed to be in a defensive crouch because we were getting hammered. And the idea that you could step up, move forward, and take offense is really scary for a lot of folks. But I think you have to lean into it. You have to embrace that the energy this Starbucks campaign, like, it's not supposed to happen. These things are not supposed to work, and it worked. And that means the way we've thought about things is wrong. And we've got to embrace the fact that younger workers clearly know what they're doing. Now, there's things we can teach, there's ways we can help and support, but it is support. It is, encouragement. It is not probably leadership. It is, let's get out of the way and let them lead us.
Do you feel like the ALU, the Amazon Labor Union, which is the independent organization that organized the first Amazon warehouse over in Staten Island, do you think their affiliation with the Teamsters is an example of that? You know, you pointed to Starbucks Workers United as an example of kind of these two forces within the labor movement really complementing each other in a good way. You have the heft of Workers United, which is an SEU affiliate, being able to invest invest real resources and the energy of young workers and their, the animation that they feel to make their lives in the world better. Do you feel like the ALU and the Teamsters, their partnership and their affiliation is another example of combining the energy of new organizers and young workers with established labor organizers and labor organizations?
I sure hope so. I mean, I think that's pretty clearly the intent, right? You have the Teamsters with this depth of ability to deep research and corporate campaign work, and their breadth and depth of political connections, including some political connections that maybe I wish they didn't have, but nonetheless they have them. And then you have this Amazon labor union that has proven its ability to, again, mobilize and inspire workers in places where you're not supposed to be able to do it. If these things can mesh together, the potential is amazing. It is groundbreaking. I don't yet know that we're seeing it in Amazon, but I also am 100% sure that there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we don't see, because you know how this is. A lot of organizing happens behind closed doors, and even those of us in the movement don't know what's happening. And so that's my hope, is that there's a lot more going on than we see. And I think even if the Amazon labor union doesn't move as fast or as far as we want it to, I think the strategy is a sound one. Yeah, let's find ourselves a big union that knows the logistics industry, that knows the way to move big companies. The closest analog to Amazon probably is UPS, and the Teamsters have tamed UPS. And so there's a lot of good logic there. There's a lot of good sense to it. I hope it plays out in the long run for good. Right now, I think we're still watching to see.
I want to go back to Starbucks just for a second. You've talked about how, inspiring what they've been able to do is, and what they've been able to do, like, really, really is inspiring. 600 stores, 12,000 baristas. I mean, that's huge. But on the other end, it is still only a fraction of really where they need to be. They really need to organize a supermajority of workers at Starbucks to be able to tame Starbucks in the way that the Teamsters have tamed UPS. And so, what do you see as the key steps to get kind of from here to there, and how will kind of those different aspects of Starbucks Workers United, the energy of the new young organizers and the experience and heft of SEIU and Workers United as an organization, how do you see those two pieces of the puzzle fitting in together to get us from where we are now to where they need to be?
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's still not clear that that's going to happen. But I think there's reason to be optimistic. And one of the other hats I wear is I'm a trained historian, and you go back to the great glory moments of the 1930s. The Flint sit-down strike, the single greatest moment in American labor history. That was one plant in the whole General Motors, like in the massive empire of General Motors. Like the United Auto Workers didn't have anything close to a majority of General Motors employees as members of the union or even supporters of the union when they launched that strike, when they won that strike. What they did is they demonstrated they could fight the power, and they demonstrated that they could win. And that opened the door of possibilities, because the biggest thing holding workers back, polling, 70% of workers approve of unions right now. The thing that holds people back, the very reasonable thing that holds people back, is worrying, is it going to be worth it? Should I devote personal time, spiritual time, emotional time to an effort if it's not going to pay off? And so once you can prove someplace that it does work, that genuinely makes it easier for everyone else to step up. It really does. That's why the book is called, Who's Got the Power? Because once you demonstrate you have the power, it changes perspective overnight. And so I do think if they can win this strike, and by win, I mean if they can get a contract that the workers themselves feel is good. You and I might have a different definition of a win there, but it's the workers that matter. If they are happy with the contract they settle, the fact that they have networks across the whole Starbucks empire, I think suggests that they could probably roll up other stores very quickly.
Right. Yeah, especially if they're able to get something like a positive neutrality agreement. I think,
Yes.
I think once you're able to get Starbucks to stop the union busting, I think rolling up, like you said, rolling up the rest of them is going to be a lot easier than what they've done so far. You mentioned the 1934 sit-down strike, and that is an incredible piece of history that I really recommend folks reading about. And you mentioned it in your book, and so I brought to the studio just to show off a little bit. I have a first edition copy of The Many and the Few by Henry Krause that is autographed by Henry Krause. He was the newsletter editor or something of the UAW, and he wrote a book about the Flint sit-down strike. And the way that it reads is really almost like a spy thriller. I mean, it's incredible. It's a super cool thing, and it's an indictment of our society that I was able to get it for $10 on eBay. So
I really think that if someone's going to make like a Netflix series or whatever on union organizing, it's a spy genre. It really is it's a thriller. It's about clandestine meetings. It's about conversations that have different meanings to different people in different rooms. It's about who's watching around the corner. I mean, you could absolutely do it as a brilliant spy drama.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Oh, especially the Flint one. I mean, one of the meetings that comes to mind is how they had a meeting with a lot of people in it where they said a strategy that they're not going to do so that they could get the company spies to go and tell the company they were going to do this thing. And then they had the real meeting with the real organizers, and they had weeded out all the stool pigeons and stuff. And they did, I don't know. It's super, super cool. Really interesting stuff. So I recommend people reading it, The Many and the Few by Henry Krause.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely worth reading.
Some good lessons for today. Yeah. Speaking of the UAW, you focus a portion of your book is focused on graduate worker unionism. The UAW has been a really big player in organizing workers in graduate programs, and you talked about how the legal landscape has been constantly shifting for graduate workers. At one point in American history, they have the right to unionize, and then they don't. We're in a period right now where they've had the right to organize for several years, and they have established themselves really as a force in the American labor movement. And that gives you hope for optimism that they're able to maintain. Now that they've got this huge foothold, I mean, probably 100,000 grad workers across the country are organized. They have gone on strikes. They have gotten their administrations to capitulate and give them good contracts. And so that gives you reason for optimism that even if the NLRB, quote unquote, takes away the right to organize, that they still are able to keep it. But then on the other hand, you have graduate workers at Vanderbilt University, a private college in Tennessee. They withdrew their petition for a union election earlier this year out of what I can only surmise is a fear that the Trump NLRB would take away the right to unionize for all private sector graduate workers. And you have also not seen a similar graduate worker union flourishing in public sector universities in red states where they don't have the right to collective bargaining like they have in blue states. And so I'm curious, how do you kind of weigh those two things, the reasons for optimism and the reasons for pessimism, and what do you make of the landscape that exists under Trump for this section of the labor movement that has really provided some of the biggest wins for the labor movement over the last 5 to 10 years?
I mean, again, last time I made a correct political prediction was 2008, and so I should get out of the business completely. The first Trump administration didn't act on graduate student unionism. It's the dog that didn't bark. They didn't take away their legal rights to organize. And that's why we've had this explosion, because they've now had the legal right for 10 years, and they've used it. And as you say, in that time, I come out of the graduate employee unionism world long ago and far away in the public sector. But now every institution in the Ivy League except for Princeton is organized, and almost all the biggies around the country, Stanford and USC and Duke and so many others, including some in red states like Duke, have organized unions successfully. But it is true that a bad decision from the labor board can cause a lot of challenge. Now, the Vanderbilt thing, like I don't have any inside information, but the Vanderbilt thing was about a law called FERPA, the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, and the obligation of the employer to preserve student information. And does that mean you can give out employee information? And that issue actually bubbled up in the early aughts, and I thought it had been resolved. I'd frankly forgotten all about it until the Vanderbilt issue came up. But clearly the UAW is right to be concerned about what's going to happen. It's also true that the National Labor Relations Board has a lot more power over a new union that's trying to organize than one that's already established. The ones that are already there, they have a collective bargaining agreement, and the National Labor Relations Board cannot, or at least will not, even under this board, will not nullify that agreement. The employers may say, well, we're not going to bargain anymore, and the unions would have to fight it out, but they've proven they can fight, and they've proven they can win. And so, I mean, everyone's right to be cautious, and the Trump Labor Board's going to do some pretty terrible things. But my God, you're right. It's 100,000 people probably now organized in all the major institutions of higher education in the country. And they did so very quick and with massive margins, 98% wins, 97% wins in these huge turnout elections. I think I like their chances of holding on, even if the labor board is mean to them.
You mentioned in your book that that grad workers are winning by margins that would make dictators blush. So it is really astounding. And one of the things that I think is so important about graduate worker unions and the Starbucks union is that for most people, you know, particularly in the graduate worker setting, but even at Starbucks, for most people, they're not going to spend a career at Starbucks, and they're definitely not going to spend a career as a graduate student worker. Right. And so they're going to go into other places having had experience fighting the boss and winning and getting that confidence in your own power as a worker that comes with that. What do you think that is going to mean, 10 years from now, when we've got a whole economy that has been seeded with all of these people that have had really positive experiences with the labor movement, really positive direct experiences with the labor movement, not just, I saw on the news that the UAW got a good contract, or my great uncle was in the coal miners union, but when I was at university, when I was at college, I got a big raise because I fought and won. What is that going to mean 10 years from now when these people are all over the economy?
This excites me more than almost anything else. It is, you're blowing on the dandelion and the seeds are scattering. The graduate unionism, 10 years from now, every pharmaceutical company who hires researchers are going to be hiring people who were union members. What's that going to do to the pharmaceutical industry? I don't know, but I'm really excited to find out. What's it going to do to the computer science industry, or the whole computer industry, like everything around computer programming? All those people are getting master's degrees and PhDs in programs that are unionized. What's that going to mean to them? Like all those workers coming in, especially in those knowledge industries, which have always had a hard time organizing, which have always resisted unionization, except in very specific cases, like, say, in Hollywood. That's a fundamental change, and I'm just thrilled to see what's going to happen to some of these large corporate entities when all the people they can hire for their jobs are people with union experience. Even if they don't organize their workplaces, are they going to come in with a higher social conscience? Are they going to come in with a better sense of right and wrong? Are they going to come in ready to fight bad practices that their employers undertake? I think the chances of it are pretty good. And so the knock-on effects of that could go forever and ever and ever. And it's also the case with these Starbucks workers. Like you say, very few people go to work at a Starbucks and stay there their entire lives. They go someplace else. And the union has created this very participatory model where it's not just they join the union, like the levels of activity of the workers in the Starbucks union are incredibly high. So you're right. People aren't just going to say they were in a union, they were active in a union. And that first experience inoculates you against everything to come. And so the whole service industry, but also a lot of these folks are going to end up at a law firm, or they're going to end up at a hospital, or they're going to end up at a bank. And their ability to challenge power because they've experienced it and done it, it really excites me. You had Brenda from the MFE on before this. The reason MFE didn't have to strike in 2025 is they did in 2022, and the school board knows they would do it again. And once you pull something like that off, you have the confidence to stand up and fight again, and the employers know that they can't push you around so much.
Right. And so there are lots of other stories and campaigns that you talk about in your book. Folks definitely need to read it, get it. Who's Got the Power is the title of the book. And as you said, it's like a collection of stories that taken together have kind of gotten you to be more of an optimist than a pessimist, because you talked about how, as you grew up in the labor movement, you saw a lot of false dawns, like the 1997 UPS strike, where in the moment it seemed like maybe this is an opportunity for the labor movement to turn into a fighting labor movement again. And 1997 particularly, you had Ron Carey at the Teamsters, you had the New Voices slate at the AFL-CIO, you had Trumka having just taken over the UMWA, sort of a reformy kind of guy. Really, like across the labor movement, reason for optimism, and just nothing happened. Just literally nothing happened. It's really sad. And so that experience kind of made you a pessimist, but these stories have gotten you to become more of an optimist. And so I'm interested in what specifically made that switch flip for you, especially because if you zoom out from some of these, from any one of these individual campaigns or stories, or even all of them put together, if you just look at the one big number, union density in the United States, it has continued to decline. It declined every year under the Biden administration, and that is certainly at least one data point that you can point to have reason for pessimism. And so, what is it about these stories and these campaigns that you feel like kind of overrides things that you could look at on the other hand that would give you reason to continue being a pessimist?
Yeah. Look, the density number is definitely the biggest thing that weighs on me. Like, great things are happening. The numbers aren't moving on a global scale. And it's very reasonable and understandable to say, look, that really should mean something, and it's not. And so I agree that's there. Here's the thing that I feel was different. The 97 UPS strike was a successful strike. It was a successful defensive strike. It preserved full-time jobs and kept and reduced the amount of part-time jobs. And it was a temporary solution because they had to fight the whole thing again this last time around. But the wins that labor had at that time, with certain exceptions, the Justice for Janitors campaign probably being the single biggest exception, were defensive wins. And for most of my lifetime, winning in the labor movement was stopping bad things from happening. It was holding off cuts. It was holding off layoffs. It was holding off plant closures. It was holding off privatization. The UPS contract that they bargained this last time around, without having to strike, resulted in a genuine, honest-to-God improvement of the financial position of those workers in a very real way. Like, they won real money, and the Frito-Lay workers who I interviewed in Topeka, Kansas, in the first chapter of my book, like they had two contracts they bargained in a row, and the first one was kind of a tie, but the second one they won real wage gains and they won real changes to their working conditions that improved their working conditions, and especially their hours of work, because they were working these ridiculously long weeks and never getting a time off, and they got time off. The ability to actually win offensive gains as opposed to just holding the line, which is a victory in itself quite often, but winning these offensive gains is something we really haven't seen. If you were in the labor movement in the 50s and the 60s, like you were constantly winning. You were expanding your pensions. You were expanding your health insurance. You were winning more vacation days. You were winning raises above the cost of living, and that was what you expected to do. And then by the 90s and the aughts and the teens here, you didn't expect that anymore. And a win was you preserved family health insurance. The last few years have seen actual honest-to-God wins, improvements in the lives of workers. And the labor movement has to deliver improvements in the lives of workers if it's going to thrive. And so I feel like having won those specific things, the stage is set. Now, look, the density thing is still sitting there, and I still worry about it. But that the proving you can win is proving that you can improve people's lives is going to make it easier for us, is going to make and the labor movement, I think, still has too many leaders who are still used to being in that defensive crouch. I think the leaders have to be willing to take more risks now, be more bold. You might lose some of those. You might get beat. It might be embarrassing, but we're going to need those risks now. And if they're willing to take those risks, I think we could see a lot of great things happen. But maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe this will just be another false dawn. But if so, it's still a story worth remembering.
Yeah, no, I like that. I appreciate that optimism and also the encouragement for risks. Earlier you said that more established organizers should be offering younger, newer organizers support. What kind of support can they offer, or what sort of education or training do you see newer organizers missing as they're entering this?
That's a good question, and I would say that if you are a veteran organizer like me, don't go into the space thinking I'm going to teach them things they don't know, because we can be incredibly condescending without even trying, right? We can actually be trying to help and end up being just patronizing, condescending. Instead, what we've really got to do, engage, listen, and ask what they need, and then try to deliver that. One of the things I volunteer with is the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, EWOC. And there are a lot of times where I have this sort of condescending older guy thinking, well, I should go and do a well actually to these people and tell them the story. But what actually does happen with EWOC is time and time again, people genuinely ask questions to learn, and there's an opportunity to teach, and you take it. And so there's got to be a patience there, a patience to wait for people to come and ask you for the help, because I think they are. I think a lot of the younger workers who are organizing these places, they are not pretending they know everything. They know there's a lot they don't know. They're asking for help, and then you can bring it. And what I would also say is that there's a difference between bringing your expertise and bringing your experience. And I think it's the latter that experience that more veteran organizers should be bringing. I like to think of myself as someone with a lot of expertise. I think I know a lot more about labor stuff than most people. I really do think that's true. But when I actually am put in a position where I'm genuinely mentoring somebody, it's experience that comes out rather than expertise. It's, yes, you're walking through this. I've been down this road before. Let's talk about how it's working out for you. Let's talk about some, ways that you might, learn from the ways in which we've done it in the past. But let's also see what kind of inventive ideas you might have and how they play out. And so I would say, first of all, be patient. Wait for them to come to you, and lean more on your experience than your expertise, because illiterate shoemakers in Massachusetts did this 100 years ago. Expertise is overrated when it comes to labor, but experience still matters.
What do you think is the most important takeaway from your book?
The most important, well, I said it in the book, and I'm genuinely serious about it. If you take one thing away from my book, put duct tape on the handles of your picket signs. It is absolutely a crime to see people on a picket line holding a plain wooden stick. That will kill your hand after 20 minutes. You put a little bit of duct tape on it, and you can go all day with that picket sign. In the broader sense, what I hope people take away is hope, that you don't have to be pessimistic forever. Things are really bad right now. There's so many terrible things happening every day, and it's easy to just kind of fall into a space of despair. And I want people to remember it doesn't have to be this way, which was the original title of the book, and we changed. It doesn't have to be this way, and we can build something better together. And my hope is that this book will inspire folks and encourage them to go out and try themselves.
We've been talking to Dave Camper, senior strategist at the Economic Policy Institute and author of the new book, Who's Got the Power? The Resurgence of American Unions. Check it out wherever books are sold. You can also get it from Red Emma's, which is a worker-owned bookstore. And if you get it from Powell's Books in the Pacific Northwest, you can use the union's affiliate link, and 7.5% of the book will go to the union's strike fund. So that's cool. So get it from Powell's or Red Emma's. Dave, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.